Hey everyone, Yan Zhao here. We're here with Rob Muerto.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you. It was a nice chat we were just having prior to going live.
Yes, whole sad state of
Affairs
California.
in California. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, just to give anyone who's not familiar with you a little background, um, where are you from, and where have you been?
So I'm from Lisbon, Portugal, born and raised. Uh, but as you can tell from my accent, and we were discussing this prior to going live, it's I speak like an American because I went to an American international school here in Portugal, and since then Uh, I've been all over the place, but ended up in California for a good long while, 8 years.
What brought you out here?
I wanted to make it big in the movie industry, man.
Yeah.
No, entertainment
Oh, okay,
is
cool.
my thing, and it still is. It still is, and it still is, and it's extended to comic books as well. But I
So,
did a little bit of screenwriting and producing,
oh, okay.
and that's it. Yeah.
Um, So, out of curiosity, what made you decide to switch over to go from more like the film side and decide to write comic books?
Well, the comic book thing was originally conceived of as a script. This Tales from the Classroom property that we'll be discussing was actually written as a script originally,
Oh, okay.
but because it was a very visual sort of world, and you had to spend a lot of time. Part of the appeal was in the visuals. I feel like it's a much better pitch if you can use it as a if you can like turn it into a comic book first and then try to adapt it from there. I know that sounds sort of icky for comic book fans, but
No.
the news is I've always been a massive comic book head, and if this doesn't turn into a TV show and it doesn't get picked up by your Netflix of the world, and honestly, I think it won't because of the political content in it, because of the political climate uh,
Uh-huh.
in the world in general at the moment. Um, I don't mind because I just want to see it live as in some kind of form. And comic books have always been very near and dear to me,
Hmm.
uh, and so I'll be happy if it's just that. So I'm trying to make this the best comic book that it can be. If it doesn't turn out to be anything else, uh, whatever. If it turns out to be a TV show or a movie as I envisioned it originally, then fantastic.
So then, as someone who grew up in Lisbon but went to an American school, what comics influenced you growing up? What were your favorites?
Dude, I could go on forever. Are you talking about runs or just?
Well, whichever. One of the things is most Americans really aren't very familiar with European comics, and so I'm
Uh,
kind of wondering, um,
that
you
wasn't
know,
my thing either. Honestly, like I
Mhm.
read some European comics like Asterix and Obelix and Lucky Luke and a few others, but they never really appealed to me. I was always more drawn to the American comic books. And actually, there's these Brazilian comic books that I actually
Mhm.
also really liked called Turma da Mônica, uh, and those were awesome.
Huh.
But they're more kid oriented,
Mhm.
and no, but from a very early age, I was drawn to Daredevil, Frank Miller's run,
Oh, wow.
because my older brother, used to read comics, and
Steal his.
I would steal his. Yeah, I would start reading his, and that was the thing that he read. So it was pretty edgy for like a 5-year old or whatever, or not a
Oh,
5-year old,
wow. Five?
a
Man,
7-year-old
that's
to be
early.
reading these things. But that's what I liked, and then I started really getting into them when I learned the language English and started picking up the original language comic books. Got into some Peter David Hulk.
Mhm.
Uh, really loved Grant Morrison, and several things. Not when he gets too weird, like the Invisibles. That's too esoteric for me.
Yeah.
Stuff like that toes, that's like middle of the road in terms of his of Morrison weirdness, like Animal Man. I really loved.
Oh, cool.
JLA, I think, is the greatest superhero possibly run of all time, and a few others.
Um, so then, Tales from the Crypt. I'm kind of curious, of all the things you could have picked, you decided to go with monsters in high school. So what made you sort of gravitate towards that?
Well, you have to understand that this was written way back in the day, right?
Sure.
And and this was hot off the heels of Twilight's massive success. And I was just like racking my brain trying to understand what the appeal was with Twilight, right?
Uh-huh.
Or Harry Potter. That's another one that really got. Harry Potter is a cultural behemoth,
Oh,
and
for sure. It's
and I really try to understand what the deal. What is it that drew people so much to these particular properties that were like the big deal back then?
Mhm.
And I realized that the thing that they have in common is it's a fantasy. It's a very relatable setting, which is high school, right?
Uh-huh.
Impinged with a fantastical element. So you put the fantasy into high school, and people seem to be drawn to that.
Yeah.
And I felt that like if you think about it, X-Men is a huge thing. That's
Mhm.
basically superheroes in high school. Maybe the high school element is not so played up these days, but that's how it started. Spider-Man. I don't think people are particularly drawn to arachnids,
No.
arachnid-like powers, even though they're cool. But that's not what makes Spider-Man such a household name. I think Spider-Man was the OG superhero in high school.
Yeah,
Mm.
so in reading Tales from the Classroom, the one thing I really noticed and I really liked and appreciated about it, is kind of what you were saying here, is that ultimately this is a teen high school drama. Um, and it does have monsters, and it plays on a lot of the monster myths
Trope.
and tropes, but it's certainly relatable to anyone who has been in a high school situation. You've got your cliques, you've got the girl that's out of your league, the guy who grew up rich and is dating the girl that's out of your league. So it's instantly recognizable, but it's still got that monster flavor, but it's not overpowered
Hmm.
by the
Well,
monster.
yeah, of course, it's a fairly by the numbers high school fish out of water tale so far. At least from the first issue, it gets more and more interesting. I think as the story progresses and more innovative. I feel narratively. Um, but that's the point. I think everybody, as I said, high school is an extremely relatable setting because we're all from different walks of life. People
Hmm.
have drastically disparate experiences as they go out into the world. But one thing that unites people and that everybody can relate with is the high school experience, or at least the vast majority of people can.
It
Uh,
did you for your high school? Was that also an American school?
that was my. I went through several schools. I wasn't the greatest student, so I kept bouncing around. But from fifth grade to eighth or ninth grade, I went to the American school.
Okay. I was wondering because when I was reading this, um, and I have to admit, I thought, as we were talking before, I thought you were Brazilian first,
Hmm.
but the high school, a lot of times when foreigners try to write American high school stuff, it just comes out being sort of fake. It's like what they remember from 90210 or just like a Hollywood version. So it ended up becoming like a Xerox of a Xerox type of
Hmm.
thing. But this is actually, you have all those sort of like sub clicks that you would see in
Hmm.
those kind of shows, but they feel real. So I was kind of wondering, um, how close your high school experience was to this. Now, obviously, when you write, you're gonna sort of play it up, turn it up to 11, so to speak. But how close was your high school experience to
I mean, I sort of base the high school experience obviously is modeled, at least in some sense, to my own. But this is much more American. The American high school that I
Mhm.
went to was very Portuguese flavored, in the sense that it had a unique setting. We were in like a very dilapidated rural farm
Oh, geez.
that was converted into a high school, basically. So it didn't really have the at least in terms of the location and the physical space. It didn't have the trappings of your typical American high school.
Hmm. How about like socially? Was it sort of?
Socially, it was odd because it was the Portuguese that were mostly in charge. They were like at the
Mhm.
top of the pecking order, uh,
Oh, I see.
weirdly.
So
And
you guys were the vampires.
yeah, exactly, mostly. And then there was it was very extremely diverse. It wasn't necessarily an American school as much as it was totally an international school.
Hmm.
You had people from Lebanon and from Israel, and my best friend was South Korean for a while, and Italian guys. Americans were not that many, actually. There was some, obviously, but they weren't. I wouldn't say they were the main nationality. That's why the Portuguese ended up being, top of the pecking order. The vampire,
Well, sure. Home court advantage.
exactly.
Um,
But yeah, there
mhm.
was plenty of clicks. There was a lot of clicks. There was these little habits and rituals that people would go through. And for example, like the cool kids always. I don't know if uh, that's true of the rest of the world, but the cool kids over here and in my setting, they always sat in the back of the bus.
Of
Is that a
course.
thing or no?
Yeah, yeah, it's got to be. Nobody wants to be square and sit like by the
Right,
teacher
yeah,
or by the
next to the
bus
yeah,
driver.
exactly. So there's that, and there was tables that were reserved for certain people, and then there was a line that for the cafeteria that all the cool kids skipped,
Uh huh.
and nobody would say anything. And there's these things. It's the hierarchical arrangements that are true to life, even as early as that.
Well, it does prepare you for how the real world works too, because that's kind of how working in companies and if you have to deal with the government, that's kind of the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you,
It ends up being a microcosm of everything else. The high
yes,
school.
just condensed into like 4 years.
Yeah, and super like, and the kids are really living it because your hormones are, everything is hyper enhanced. So yeah,
Yeah,
so it becomes very ingrained in you as a person.
definitely. Well, and everything's new, so you try everything for the first time, so it seems exciting, as opposed to when you're like 40 and you're like, I've done that.
Hooray! Yeah, you're jaded. Yeah.
So when you had this script and you decided to turn it into a comic, how'd you go about finding your art team?
So the comic book that you're probably, I don't know if you're holding it in your hands, but
I
or if
am.
okay, because I felt like I was hearing some pages being
Oh,
turned.
yeah, sorry.
No, that's great. So the artwork that you see there. So let me just go back a little bit. So I wrote this script, right?
Hmm.
And originally, guess what it was called? It wasn't called Tales from the Classroom. It was called Monster High.
Okay.
And Monster High, after like 3 months of me pitching this script around and shopping it around to everybody that I knew that was even remotely connected to Hollywood, which were not many people at all, and it still isn't. But back then, definitely not. I would give the script off to everybody, and then after 3 months of doing this thing, Mattel announces a property called Monster High
Oh no.
with very similar with an extremely similar premise, but a totally different execution than what I had envisioned for my script. But in any case, I could no longer use the title. But I got super bummed out because for a while I thought they'd stolen it or something like that.
Yeah, I know a lot of people out here in Los Angeles who have a very similar feeling. Like
Mhm.
I people who will not discuss projects that they're working on in public because they're just like, no, that guy across the way could be a producer.
Right, yeah. hmm Well, the way that they taught me when I was doing a workshop for screenwriting at this place that was a total hack factory that I highly recommend everybody that has aspirations to be a filmmaker not go there, is this place called the New York Film Academy. Um,
Okay, I've heard of them.
yeah, they're very they're not good. But what they would tell students is like, oh, don't you worry about that. It's such it's a one in a million thing. Are there cases of things getting lifted? Absolutely, but don't worry about that. It's bullshit. It's. I think honestly, I think it's what the teachers tell the students in case that they stumble onto some kind of gold mine and they can lift it from.
Exactly. Yeah, LA is pretty cutthroat for anyone who hasn't been here. People will murder their own grandmothers just to get, something they've written seen by someone.
Yeah, but also at the same time, there is this thing called artistic synchronicity,
True.
which I think is what happened honestly with the Monster High thing, where you just people come up with the same idea in different places.
That
Like
is
your
true.
volcano. Like have you noticed how films always come in twos?
Um,
Like
well,
Volcano and Dante's Peak, or
yeah, but I think one of those was Disney and the other one was I can't remember who made it, but there was Jeffrey Katzenberg.
yeah,
So he used to be at Disney, and then I think he went over to DreamWorks. And what happened is
he founded
they
DreamWorks.
sorry,
So he founded DreamWorks. It's DreamWorks SKG. The S is for Spielberg, the K is
oh,
for Katzenberg, and
that's
the
right.
and the G is for Geffen.
Yeah, and so when he went over, all of a sudden there were a lot of DreamWorks movies that were sort of like counterparts to what was going on at Disney. There was like a Bug's Life and Ants,
Right, that's
and
right. Yeah. And then always the shitty version.
yes, yes, exactly. Whatever they could get out first.
That's so funny. Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of that
Bug's
going
Life
on.
with ants. Remember, it was ants, right?
Yeah, and they thought Woody Allen would be a great idea to make into a cartoon
Yeah,
because Woody Allen's big with kids.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Um,
but then even Deep Impact and Armageddon. I don't know if that's
they're almost the same thing.
yeah,
Yeah, you're right. What was it? Dante's Inferno and Peak? No,
Dante's Inferno and then Volcano.
Volcano. That's right. That's right. Yeah, there were a number of them at the time, and I think there were a couple other DreamWorks or Pixar titles
Mm,
that DreamWorks came out with knockoff versions.
yeah.
Um,
So yeah, I don't know what the deal is if things get stolen or not, or how common that is. But again, I also think that there's an artistic synchronicity sort of
mhm.
deal going on. And the thing is, that's just where To be honest, that's just where the culture was headed. I feel because Twilight was a massive success.
Sure.
I couldn't have been the only person sitting in my desk going, all right, so vampires and wolfmen are a big in high school are a big.
Hmm.
So why don't we just extrapolate from that and take it to the next level, and get all monsters in there.
Exactly.
And I was actually happy and relieved to find out that there was nothing remotely original about the conceit,
Uh-huh.
because there was like this '80s or early '90s TV show called Gravedale High.
Oh yeah.
That was it's basically this. I didn't know this, but it's the same premise.
I heard about that. I don't think I ever watched it, but
Yeah, I watched it and it's terrible, but
well, you're in luck then. No one's gonna remember it.
yeah.
Um, so how did you find your art team for this?
So the art team is so I wrote the script. It didn't work out. I got bummed out with the Monster High thing, and then I was like, but I feel good about this idea. I wonder if I turned it into a comic book, if it would do well. And then I got a chance to pitch it to two different comic book companies at the time. One of them was Archaia, who've since become part of Boom Studios.
Oh, okay.
The other one was this small independent publisher called Viper Comics.
Hmm.
And they got into sort of like a mini bidding war to see who would adapt the material.
Hmm.
And I ended up going with Viper because they were much more gracious in terms of just ownership of rights and stuff of this nature.
Hmm.
But so like we did that, and they were the ones that got the art. They got several
Oh,
artists
okay.
together to do some character designs and stuff. And I was like, I like this person, but it was always like very media. It was very mediated. I never
Hmm.
had a direct uh,
Oh,
communication
direct.
with the artist.
Really? I'm kind of
No, it
surprised.
was like the publisher would work as an intermediary and never give me direct access, which I thought was bizarre.
Wow, you must have gotten really lucky then, because I really like the quality of the art in the book. I think it's it's like a good kind of middle ground.
Hmm.
I don't think the story would have worked if they had gone for like a sort of like a 1950s horror comic look. Um, and it's not too cartoony. It retains enough seriousness that it doesn't look like it's for 6-year-olds.
Hmm. No, for
Uh,
sure. Yeah, I wanted
and
that. I wanted that, and I wanted uh, my whole vision for the way that I wanted to execute the property was slightly different back then because I felt that the high school
Mhm,
had to be very grounded and relatable, like a standard high school.
mhm.
And as you see, like if you leaf through the book, there's nothing special about it. There's no fantastical trappings to it. Because I felt that like the setting had to be as relatable as possible because it was such a fantastical premise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I've since totally changed my opinion on that, and I
Oh,
want
yeah?
high school to be like a character unto itself. And with the second book, we're going to retcon that.
Oh, okay.
And this is the thing with this whole crowdfunding thing and the indie comics thing. This is it's a work in progress.
Sure.
And the idea is for me to release 5 books where we're going to make mistakes along the way, or we're going to do things that we're going to like be polishing things on the path to the final book, right?
Sure.
And then in the end, re-release everything now with a totally congealed, finalized look and world and everything,
Mhm.
and and hopefully get it published by like a major publisher.
Nice. Yeah, one of the nice things too about the whole high school trope is, you've got 4 years, and there's no reason why all 4 years have to look the same.
Right. Yeah.
So it kind of, hey, maybe freshman year is kind of boring in the high school. It's pretty standard, but as they go up, it's more fantastical.
Right. Yeah. Well, but the thing is, you're holding a book that so the artist is Sebastian Bronico, who is a
Hmm.
fellow from Argentina. Um, as I told you, the publisher was the person that got in touch with this artist, who at the time was they didn't even get in touch with him personally. He was like part of like the studio,
Oh,
like this
wow.
artist studio that they had some relationship with. So like he was the guy there. Anyway, Viper Comics folded
Hmm.
halfway through the process, right? Like I was
Oh,
developing the comic, the pencils were looking great. I was very happy with that. But then we got to the color stage, and the colors that they start giving me were so god awful. I was like, "What is going on here?" I think they ran out of money. Honestly, they started like shortchanging me,
uh-huh.
and, and just as the project started like as this started happening, all of a sudden they folded basically, and I abandoned the project for a good long while, and then fast forward 5 or 6 years, and my first born comes to be, and my wife kept nagging me saying, "Listen, what you remember that comic book that you were working on? Why don't you retake the mantle?" Basically, I think it'd be so nice for him to like as he grows up to have something like that to read.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was like, you know what? She's right. I'm going to see if I can track this Sebastian Ronico guy down, find a colorist, and finish it basically in a letter,
Hmm.
and finish it and get it crowdfunded, because I didn't want to do the whole thing of like trying. It's very tough for you to get a book published
Definitely.
when you're known. Basically, it doesn't matter how good you feel the book is. I think you
Yeah,
have to know people in the industry.
that's the way comic books are much like Los Angeles. It's all pretty incestuous. You got to know somebody to know somebody. But I think you made the right decision, because once you start getting a few books published, it's much easier to go to a publisher and say, "Hey, look, I made this much in crowdfunding. I have this many fans." So it makes it easier for them to justify, like, "Okay, well, we'll probably get,
Yeah,
X amount of
you
sales."
want to build up to that, and I may not even go to like one of those mainstream publishers, because
Hmm.
the state of affairs at the moment,
That's
it's
true.
so- it's such a weird scene, so ideologically compromised, basically.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of things like in my book, like socio-cultural stereotypes
Hmm.
that I embrace. I don't like to. I'm not trying to be offensive or anything. I think it's all tongue in cheek and very lighthearted. But
Definitely.
these days, everything's so sensitive that certain people are bound to take offense at a number of those those stereotypes. I think stereotypes need to be brought back. To be honest, there's
Yeah.
there's something fun about them. Like it's not. Nobody's going to die from seeing. I'm not going to die if I see like a Portuguese person like portrayed with a mustache or in a gold chain or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's. I think it's funny.
Yeah. And I mean, it's funny when there's some truth behind it too.
Exactly.
Uh,
Especially then.
So, how is it? Because I see, um, let me see. You've got a thing up on Indiegogo for Tales from the Classroom Part Two. So, how is it coming back to this property after so long? If it was easy to get back into the characters, did you have a bunch of ideas you were just raring to go, or was it kind of like,
I
okay,
have,
what can I do next?
so listen. As you know, I have the script already. It's been done for years. I'd almost forgotten about it, but it's much easier when you have something like that to work off of because you have a roadmap or a general roadmap
Hmm.
uh, to follow as a writer. But it's funny because with the second one, like I took a big detour.
Uh-huh.
I followed my instincts and decided to take a big detour that was not in the script at all. Um, and I think it's for the best. I had like a lot of fun writing this. I think it's a substantially better book than the first one in all fronts, including
Oh,
the
nice.
art, because I had to substitute the art team as Sebastian did not. He's not going to go to the. He didn't want to be a part of the second one to get
Okay.
through or whatever. And I have my dream art team, which is Monica McCagney and
Yes.
Tanya Wicker in colors. They're basically Monster MD's team. I don't know if you're familiar with Monster MD.
Yeah, I had Von Klaus on a few weeks ago, and that was one thing I noticed. In further down on that on the page for the sign up list,
Hmm.
tales from the tale of Claytope,
Cleotep.
Cleotep. Oh, sorry. Um, yeah, and it definitely looks like a cousin to Monster MD. Like you would expect the van um, that they drive around in to show up in one of your comics at some point.
Oh, yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I'd love to do some kind of crossover further down the line. So this is the sign up page for Tales from the Classroom 2, right?
Hmm. Yep.
But the development on Tales from the Classroom 2 is still going on.
Hmm.
All the pages, the pencils and inks are done. Monica
Wow.
has that wrapped. Uh, we're about 6 pages in with colors, but it's a 50 plus page book, so it's going to take a while before it releases. So what I'm doing is I'm taking these ancillary stories, these supplemental stories that I originally envisioned as being a part of the Tales from the Classroom 2 volume,
Hmm.
and separating them and doing their own book. Because those stories are finished. Everything it's like
Uh-huh.
basically finished.
Oh,
The
nice.
art, the lettering, the everything. It's at a really advanced stage. So the idea is for me to release next month. It should have been this last month. It should have been June, but sorry. Now the idea is for me to release in July. This month, um, the new campaign for this book. It's going to be called Tales from the Classroom: The Cthulhu Files. Cthulhu being the high school that the
Hmm.
monsters attend.
Oh, very
And
cool.
it's going to feature several several sort of self-contained stories uh, that inform the reader on the universe, the Tales from the Classroom universe more, and
Hmm.
also some of the characters. You delve deeper into them. It's gonna be super fun, and the idea is to get like some of the most talented people in indie comics, uh, and we did get them. One of them is Matt Krotz,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
did Kyrie. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's
Yeah.
a talented creator. So he did the art for this story that I wrote called "Quest for the Cosmic Dreidel," and
This
it's
made me
about
laugh so hard when I saw this.
yeah, it's funny, and it's about Joshua who makes a little cameo in the first book. I don't know if you even noticed him, but he's buddies with
Hmm.
Drake. But he's sort of like a gentle giant, he's part of Drake's clique, but he's not as mean spirited as some of the other members
Uh-huh.
of that clique. Um, and it's a fun little story that So all the monsters go on a field trip to the local, not the local, like an historic synagogue that's famous, and basically like the trip takes a turn for the surreal as Joshua becomes well, he goes on an adventure on this quest to find the cosmic dreidel, but it gets very psychedelic and very weird very quickly.
Cool. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, the second, yeah, it's a really fun story. The other story is based on Cletus, who's the bus driver. He also makes a cameo in the first volume, if you were paying attention.
Hmm.
A very brief one, but he's there, and he's sort of like our redneck mummy school bus driver, but that has like a mysterious past. And this is a story that's going to let you in on what the deal with Cletus is. And I commissioned Vaughn because I like the stuff that he's done, Vaughn Klaus, to write this short story. And I think he did a tremendous job. It's fantastic. It's small. It's not a lot of pages, but he got a lot condensed into that space. And he managed to make it an epic tale somehow. So props to him. In 12
Nice.
pages or whatever.
So, as someone in Europe, when you're trying to sell or fulfill these books
Hmm.
in, like, probably North America would be the largest market, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, how is that difficult for you? Is it no problem?
Well, the fulfillment I had with the first book, what happened was that the printing company that I chose to go with,
Hmm.
Mixam, were based out of the UK, and they offered, coincidentally, as I was like speaking to them about like the printing specs and prices and all these things.
Uh-huh.
They announced that they were launching their own fulfillment service, and I was like, all right, maybe that's something that I should do because it just makes sense, And so they handled it. They handled the fulfillment, and I'll be
Oh,
doing
okay.
the same thing with the second one, except out of the American branch because it makes much more sense and it's much more less costly if
Definitely.
fulfillment is done out of the U.S.
Yeah, I've been talking to some people who are from the U.S. making books,
Hmm.
and everybody's thinking like, oh, well, how can we increase our sales overseas? And
Mm.
one of the biggest problems is definitely the cost. Shipping out of the U.S. is just unbelievably expensive.
Yes, it is. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll try to like I'm going to speak to Mixum, and maybe I'll fulfill half from the UK
Mm-hmm.
and then another half from the US. Because they have two branches. They didn't have it at the time. They only had the UK one.
Mm-hmm.
But now that they have two different branches, then maybe that's something to be done.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely something to look into.
I'm sorry, but I didn't mention another story that's also going to be featured.
Oh, uh-huh.
But I didn't have space because this is the pre-launch campaign, and they limit
Uh,
like how much stuff you can put in there.
uh-huh.
But another story that I'm very jazzed about is called Back in Romero, and it's with Maxi Dallo, who is this really nice artist that worked on The Kill Journal, which is another nice crowdfunded indie book.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he hails from Argentina, and anyway, I wrote that as well, and it's the story of Rob when he attended Romero High, and how he used to be the coolest zombie and around and everything. So it's the story prior to going to Cthulhu and being like the bottom rung. So
Uh-huh.
it's the story of that, of how he
Robin's
became
glory days.
Rob's glory days, but how he came to be the most popular zombie in his own high school. That's the story basically.
Oh, very cool. And so, Is that sort of how you see the books going forward? Like each book is made up of smaller stories, or is there like one overarching theme or
Well,
storyline? Or
the idea, and also like the part of the reason why I thought of this is because this is obviously Tales from the Classroom is an homage to Tales from the Crypt, and
Mhm.
Tales from the Crypt was a an anthology like
Yeah,
series
yeah,
where they had like you had like multiple stories from the different artists and all that. So I like the idea of having one main uh, overarching narrative, right?
yeah, yeah.
With the beginning, a middle, and end, and then having all these little self-contained stories that are supplemental to the main one, that inform the main one, but aren't absolutely necessary for you to enjoy the main story. You know,
Hmm.
they add to it, but they're not necessary.
So you were mentioning before that in the future you'd like to go through a publisher. Is it something where you'd like to break up the books into sort of more like the standard 22-page floppies, and like have someone publish like more of those, if you
the
know what, or you want it, or you're
idea,
thinking.
so
Mhm,
I like the idea of floppies, like doing it in floppy version as I'm doing the crowdfunded thing, right?
mhm.
But then eventually, further down the line, I want to put these supplemental stories that I mentioned and that I'm doing a separate campaign for, add them to the main one, right?
Uh-huh.
And release it in hardcore in hardcover format,
Oh, okay, so more like a.
like a deluxe hardcover format where you get the main story and you get the supplementals as well.
Okay, so like probably, over 100 pages, somewhere in the like.
Well over 100 pages, yeah,
Oh, nice.
yeah. Because this one, these supplement the tales from the classroom, the tale. Sorry, I got my titles all wrong. Um, the Cthulhu files.
Hmm.
That's going to be pushing 100 pages as well.
Oh, really?
Probably, yeah, it's
Wow.
going to be in that region. So you
Uh,
take that and you add it to the 50 something uh, pages of Tales from the Classroom 2, and it's pretty meaty, you know.
mhm, definitely. So, in terms of crowdfunding, how is this? How do you think this sort of changes the game for, like you were saying, if you're not already in the industry or you don't necessarily have an in with somebody? Um, it seems to be the way to go. Do you think it's going to continue like it has been the last 3, 4 years, or do you see it sort of plateauing and then things just go back to major publishers?
I don't know. I'm sort of torn on that because at the same time, I see that a lot of the customer service in the crowdfunding game has been improved
Hmm.
quite a lot. You know, I've been receiving parcels that are, the comics that you get are like mint condition. I just got like an amazing parcel from Doug Ernst
Oh, nice.
and Vaughn. Finally, actually, Monster MD got tied up with because the customs in Portugal are a pain.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it got tied up in customs, but finally it arrived and in perfect condition. Like the presentation was stellar,
Hmm.
and Doug Ernst as well. So it's nice, It's like from a customer perspective, as those things improve, I see the sort of the crowdfunding market being increasingly viable. And I mean, if we continue living in this apocalyptarian reality of COVID post COVID reality, then it's the only game in town because comic book shops aren't going to be existing
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. They're most of the ones near me have shut down, um, probably permanently. which is unfortunate.
Yeah, mine is the one that I go to over here in Lisbon, still open, but it's now a tent. No, I'm
Oh
joking.
no.
It's not really, but it's close to it. I hope that these guys can survive. So restaurants, man, restaurants, and these types of small commerce shops have really taken a hit.
Yeah. So, here in the US, the American, or I guess you say North American style comics have really taken a hit, and the whole industry is in the toilet.
Yeah,
Whereas, like right now, it's all about manga. So, what's it like in Europe? What's big over there?
I think the same, much the same. Here's the thing about globalism and the internet is that now America's culture is basically the world's culture increasingly.
Hmm.
So whatever trends are going on in America, it used to be like it would take 15 years to come over to Europe,
Uh huh.
and sometimes it would be there would be this phenomenon where like whatever was hot in Europe was not in America, and whatever was hot in. But now these days, I'll give you an example, like techno
Hmm.
music, like electronic music, EDM was always the thing. Like when you went out in Europe, that was what you heard,
Uh huh.
what you listened to. And in America, that was impossible. You would go out, as a teenager from my generation, and it was all hip hop.
Yeah.
And then it became Europe embraced hip hop like 15 years later, and then America embraced EDM 15 years later. So now, while hip hop was a big deal in Europe, EDM was becoming a big deal. So it was inverted.
Hmm.
But these days, everything's sort of like a monolith.
Seems that way. And it seems like it's all coming from Japan too.
Right. Well, yeah, Japan, or because Japan, like, they're profiting from this because they stuck to their guns. It's not they stuck to their guns. They're not. They haven't been infected with this mental virus that is wokeism, and the neo-Marxist
Yeah.
leanings that the West has embraced,
Yeah. And Japan is always
particularly America.
it's always been an interesting country because so I lived there for about 2.5 years in the 2000s, and at the time they had better cell phones than anyone in the world,
Mhm.
but everything they at least at that time everything they did was very focused on Japan, so they wouldn't change any of their cell phones um, to have them really go out in other countries. They didn't care what other countries users were,
Right.
and it made it fantastic until you got to a certain point, and then the iPhone overtook everything. But that's really how I see their entertainment too, is for the most part they don't really care about foreign sales. Like, that's all gravy. They just care about Japanese audiences. So, as long as they're sort of serving them, they're
You know,
very happy to have, whatever you get in the US and other places is extra.
yeah, but the issue with that is that eventually, and this is inevitable, they're going to start censoring manga
Yep.
and anything that doesn't, toe the party line.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we can sort of start to see it. There's been some anime that's gotten censored, that's kind of sort of approved from Japan,
Right.
because they say, we don't really understand what these foreigners want, so we'll let the local companies, censor it. But I can definitely see that starting to take place. So, do you see anywhere that that's coming up? Like, where would be the next place that they still have, uh, well, basically stories that aren't censored, whether it's governmental or self-censored?
I think Japan is one of them, and China, they don't give a shit. They censor it, but in a totally different type of censorship, not the one that we're talking about here, where like you're afraid to tackle anything because it's going to offend this person or that
Hmm.
person. The way that they censor it is if you do anything that's against the government and against the state, then you're done as a person.
Yes.
It's a terrible form of censorship, but
Well, I hate to tell you, but it's actually worse than that too, because not only, well, that's like the main one. You can't do anything against the government, but
mhm,
then everything you publish has to go through the censorship board first. So they'll get into editorial decisions. They would be like, well, I'm looking at Tales from the Classroom, and bones are rude, so you can't have any characters with bones sticking out.
right. Right.
Or
What is there's? I'm assuming there's a rationale behind it.
well, that actually goes back to Buddhism, where when they would cremate a body, they don't cremate at a high enough temperature to burn everything, so the bones are left, and then you put the bones into a box and bury the box.
Mhm.
Um, but they'll do other things. Like a few years ago, they banned time travel stories.
All right, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And they're not joking. It's because somebody thought like, oh, this is terrible. Um, China is the one place that I don't agree with people will be taking over culture, because when I lived there, it was amazing just how bad their stuff was.
No,
Like,
it's terrible. No, but here's the thing. But what else is there? If the West collapses, which it looks like it's at the way that it's going, it's inevitable because it's on.
mhm.
It's really like going on like at speed towards the finish line, basically.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
and then
I
you have
think
to think
Africa.
something else
I
culturally. Even culturally,
Yeah.
I always thought China's never going to be like a big superpower because they might get there militarily,
Hmm.
even though they're still light years behind the states. But that could change.
Oh,
Uh, they
yeah,
definitely they have gotten there economically, but
sure.
culturally, it's beyond them because even their ability to sell the Chinese anything to the world, it's the Japanese are way better at it,
Oh yeah,
way better. Well,
right.
just look at manga, right?
Definitely. So when do you have a tentative schedule for when you think you're gonna launch the campaign for Tales from the Classroom 2?
For the launch of the Cthulhu files,
Yeah.
which is basically a primer for Tales from the Classroom 2,
Okay.
and I think is going to be a really fun book. I want to launch it no later than uh, 10 days from now, basically.
Oh, that's soon. Wow, it's
10
coming
days
up.
from now. And then once I do launch,
Uh-huh.
I don't want it to be sitting around in demand for a long time. I want to
Hmm.
start fulfilling
Okay.
about 2 months into the launch.
Oh, that seems like a pretty reasonable time.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have to agree. One of the downsides with a lot of crowdfunding campaigns is you back it, and then like a year later, one day you sort of like, hey, didn't I back that book?
No, because but rightly because most of the crowdfunded books are in production. They
Hmm.
start in production as alongside the campaign launch.
Yeah.
But in the case of I don't like launching anything unless the book's already basically wrapped. But I have that luxury. But but yeah, I want to like cover the whole point of the launch and having 2 months where the book is in demand is to offset some of the costs in printing and fulfillment,
Hmm.
and uh, and that's why, yeah. And then I want to get it to people's hands as quickly as possible,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
and I will.
And are you thinking of doing like one a year or two a year?
Well, it's going to be 2 a year with this because Tales from the Classroom 2, the idea is to launch it, that campaign is to launch it hot off the heels of this one in October for Halloween, you know.
Oh, very nice.
Let's see if we can make that happen. I think there's no reason to believe it can't happen. And the book is chugging along at a pretty decent clip. The only issue now is the coloring. Tanya Wicker is doing the coloring for part 2.
Hmm.
She's an amazing colorist, as you've seen from her work in Monster MD.
Hmm.
But she, she takes her time, and I like it that way. I prefer like artists to take their time and deliver like a top quality product than to rush things out and it looks half-assed.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
she takes her time, so so we'll wait it out. She's already 6 pages deep, so that's good. I foresee that by October she'll probably be around 12 or more,
Okay.
maybe 15, and then then we'll see.
Definitely sounds
We'll see
reasonable.
another 3 months after that. She'll be into the 30s, high 30s. I don't know. I have to gauge. I have to gauge how far advanced the second book is
Hmm.
before I launch it. I really want to launch it in October. It makes more sense if she somehow like produces 20 pages,
Hmm.
then I'll definitely launch it in October. If not, I might do it a little bit later.
Nice. Well, Rob, I know it's getting late there in Lisbon. Um, any last thoughts on either of the campaigns?
No, I'm very happy that you had me on. It was very nice of you. I
Yeah.
hope you enjoyed the first book. I know that you're going to be enjoying these subsequent books a whole lot more if you choose to back them. And and nothing. Hopefully, I'll speak to you again soon. I'll catch you around the interwebs.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I'd love to have you back.
It's my pleasure.
All right. So, everyone, Rob Muerto, first book, Tales from the Classroom. Oh, wait a minute. That's what I wanted to ask. So, if people haven't bought the first one, will they have an opportunity to buy it again with the subsequent campaigns?
Digitally,
Digitally. Okay.
digitally for this next one, right? The Cthulhu files.
Hmm.
If I feel like there's a lot of demand for when I launch Tales from the Classroom 2, I may include it as a physical copy as well. But the issue with that is that there's costs involved with printing.
Right.
I want to I don't want to go too crazy. It only makes sense if there's an
Large enough.
actual demand.
Yeah.
Let's see how this campaign does, and I'll gauge it from there.
Okay. Sounds awesome. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for stopping by. Rob, thanks for coming in. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we'll have more interviews in the near future.
Bye bye.